Day 4. The morning light did little to dispel the oppressive dread that clung to the cabin. Shadows stretched unnaturally, pooling in the corners as if reluctant to retreat. The cold had worsened overnight, creeping into their bones despite how closely they huddled beneath the thinning blankets. Every breath emerged in faint, ghostly puffs. Food supplies were running low. No one dared to venture outside. Not with the eyes still watching from the treeline. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, but fear held them in place. The whispers had grown bolder, no longer just murmuring from the walls. Now they called them by name, mocking, sing-song voices slithering through the air, burrowing into their ears. Erin spent the morning poring over the old book, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the brittle, yellowed pages. Each word deepened the pit in her stomach, an icy dread coiling around her ribs. Then she found it. An entry that mirrored their own experience, so perfectly it made her breath hitch. Decades ago, another group had stayed in this very cabin. Strange whispers, shifting shadows, vanishing members. One by one, they had disappeared, leaving behind only a lone survivor. The final passage made her blood run cold. You cannot leave before the 7th night. It will not let you. Erin's voice barely rose above a whisper as she read it aloud. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Jake clenched his jaw, his grip tightening around the book as if he could strangle the truth from its pages. His breathing was slow, measured, a fragile attempt to stay in control. But his knuckles turned white, his shoulders stiff with barely contained frustration. This is just some old ghost story, he muttered. But his voice wavered at the edges. People disappear in the woods all the time. That doesn't mean. He stopped. The words refused to come. Sam was less composed. He let out a harsh breath, pushing himself up so fast that his chair scraped violently against the wooden floor. No, this is bullshit, he spat, shaking his head. His fingers twitched at his sides, curling into fists. We're not trapped here. We leave. We run. I don't care what some old book says. His wild eyes flickered toward the door. But he didn't move toward it. Because they all knew. They all knew what waited outside. Cassie sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest. She hadn't spoken since Erin began reading. Her fingers pressed against her temples as though she could block out the whispers that still clung to the walls. Her breath was shallow, uneven. Then we die here, she finally murmured. The words were so soft they were almost lost beneath the wind rattling against the cabin. She turned her head slightly, just enough for Erin to see the glimmer of unshed tears in her eyes. One by one, just like them. A fresh wave of fear curled in Erin's stomach, sharp and unrelenting. The journal had said one survivor. Just one. Who would it be? Night 4. Cassie woke up screaming. The sound ripped through the cabin, raw and inhuman, jolting the others awake. Jake, Sam, and Leo bolted upright, their bodies still stiff with exhaustion, but adrenaline shot through them like fire. Cassie thrashed, her fingers tearing at her own arms. Dark red welts rose along her skin, as if unseen hands were raking their nails down her flesh. Her shrieks were animalistic, mindless with terror. It took all 4 of them, Jake, Erin, Sam, and Leo, to hold her down, their hands shaking as they fought to keep her from ripping herself apart. Get them off, she sobbed, her voice ragged, her pupils blown wide. They're on me. I can feel them. Leo's breath hitched, panic closing around his throat. Cassie's skin burned feverishly beneath his grip, slick with sweat, her muscles jerking violently, like she was being electrocuted. Cassie, there's nothing there. Leo pleaded, his voice cracking. You're safe. I swear. But they all felt it. The air shifted, thick and wrong, as if something unseen had pressed in all around them, curling into the spaces between their ribs. The walls groaned, the wooden beams stretching and creaking, as if the cabin itself was breathing. A slow, shuddering breath. That wasn't theirs. And then, a new sound. A wet, dragging noise from the far side of the room. Jake went rigid, his breath catching in his throat as his eyes flicked toward the sound. The corner where they had laid Mason's body. The blanket they had draped over him was moving. At first, it was subtle, a faint shifting, like the weight underneath had shifted on its own. Then, A twitch. The unmistakable sound of flesh against wood. Sam's breath shuddered out of him, his grip on Cassie's shoulders loosening. "No," he whispered. The blanket slid off Mason's body. His limbs were twisted, his face still locked in that frozen, silent scream. His skin had gone ashen, but his eyes were open. Jake couldn't move. His fingers numbed as he gripped the lantern, because Mason's lips were moving. A breathless, ragged whisper, too soft to hear but unmistakable. Cassie, still gasping, turned her head toward him. And then she screamed again. This time, so did Leo. Mason's body lurched, his head snapping toward them in a jerky, unnatural motion. His mouth gaped open, and from the cavern of his throat, the whispering voices poured out, overlapping, twisting, some mocking, others pleading. "Help me. Run. Let me in." Sam scrambled backward so fast he hit the wall, his chest heaving. Jake forced himself to move, grabbing the edge of the blanket and yanking it back over Mason's face, as if that could somehow stop whatever wasn't Mason anymore from speaking. But the whispers didn't stop. They slid beneath the fabric, curling around the room like smoke. Sam choked on a sob, gripping his own arms as though holding himself together. "Jesus Christ, what is happening?" Leo was shaking, his fingers pressed to his mouth, eyes wide with horror. Jake clenched his jaw, his hands balling into fists. "We need a plan. We can't just panic." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince, them or himself. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. The darkness beyond seemed impossibly deep, as if the forest itself had swallowed the last remnants of the world. No one slept. And beneath the blanket, Mason's body still twitched.